You're listening to the Things of That Nature podcast. Coming to you from a city that never sleeps is me, your host, Rockshana. I invite you to join me in truly honest, passionate, and fun talks that motivate, invigorate, and maybe inspire. Even though we're no longer in the mile high, the sky is still the limit. Everything and anything goes. So let's start talking about things of that nature. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into this episode of the Things of That Nature podcast. I'm your host, Rockshana. I do have another author for you. It's just the trend of the season. Today, I have my new friend, Vito, because I keep making new friends. So hi, Vito, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you, Roxana?
I'm doing great. Where are you talking to us from?
Cincinnati, Ohio.
Oh, I've never been to Ohio. Am I missing anything?
Not really. It's just a state. You know, it's for me. It's just a long way. I've started off in Brooklyn and then the Navy, and then lived up in Montreal for 22 years. That's where we raised the kids. Then I was on a contract for 3 years down in Florida, and via Florida, I wound up in Cincinnati, where I actually was in business with another gentleman who was a former Air Force fighter pilot, and together we got a number of patents. I'm actually a retired research industrial chemist, and this whole thing, the book and so forth, all started because on a Friday morning I got together with some of the guys from church, all older guys, and we started swapping stories. And they said, you got a lot of stories. And they said, yeah. So one of the guys suggested, why don't you write a book? I said, maybe I'll write a book. Anyway, 8 months later, I wrote a book. and it was funny because I started writing it, and after a while, it was all these memories started come flooding back. Okay, it was like after a while, the book was starting to write itself. And when I started to look at it, I started laughing a lot because compared to today, it was really very, very different. It was such a much more innocent time, and I think the book portrays a lot of that from the time with my naming my. I have two brothers, Joe and Bob, and I was the only one named Vito because the Italian tradition was to name the first son after the father's father. Well, my father had a much more difficult time with that than I did because he was named after his father's father, which was Cristofiore, which meant Christ. Okay, basically his name was Vito Altavilla. So, needless to say, he learned how to fight at a very young age until about the 8th grade when the teacher started giving him a hard time, and he things were different then. You know, anyway, he was expelled because he hit the teacher.
No way.
Oh yeah. But then that's the only serious part, because after that, the things progressed, and he met my mom, who she came from another part of Brooklyn, and she never had any store-bought clothes until she started working. Her mother used to make all the clothes. There were 2 girls and a boy, and they never bought clothes. The mother would make the clothes.
Oh, wow.
A cold water flat, if you wanted a shower, you went to the steam baths on the weekend for a dime. And it was just a different time. But I grew up anyway in an area called Garrettson Beach, which is where the book really, really starts, okay? And what was neat about it, they used to call it the seashore in the city because it was like 13 miles to the center of Manhattan. And my father with $500 down, a $2,000 mortgage, and he had a house.
Mm-hmm.
And all the neighbors said, it was a young couple with, my brother was 2 months older at the time, and I'm 2 years older. And the neighbors would just pitch in, a young married couple. You had Jimmy the roofer would give you shingles. He'd do the roof, okay? And Frank the carpenter would fix up the whatever it had to be doing. And Jerry the plumber would do something else, and so forth. And everybody pitched in. After about a week and a half, the house was in great shape. So we lived there for like 10 years. but it was a time of incredible innocence by compared to today. You couldn't explain, there was no way on earth could you ever explain a computer. A cell phone would have been incomprehensible. And if you said, well, you text, people wouldn't know what you're talking about. It just didn't happen. There were certain words that were never said, okay? One of the words that was never said when we grew up was the word sex. It just wasn't said. And in the 8th grade, I remember one time they were talking about the birds and the bees. They said, oh, it's going to be the 8th grade. We're going to learn something more about it. No, what we learned about was the birds and the bees. They had nothing to do with people. So it was just different. We were so innocent. My mother took me with her to visit a friend when I was about 7 or 8 years old. And yeah, I've told people a story before, and they said they find it kind of hard to believe, but this is absolutely true. It was about a 4-block walk, and everybody walked to where they wanted to go in those days. Okay, there was no big stores. If you went shopping, you took a cart with you and all that kind of stuff. Well, anyway, she takes me with her, and she's going to visit her friend Jean. So we get there, and she knocks on the door, and Jean says, "Come on in. I'm just finishing toweling off my daughter." Okay. Her daughter's name was Lucy. She was like a year older than me. So the screen doors open. I go in, and just as I go in, she drops the towel, and I see this girl. And I, up until that time, we thought the only difference between boys and girls is boys had short hair, wore long pants. Girls had long hair and wore dresses. And if it was cold, they wore leggings, but that was it, and they talked a little different, and they weren't quite as strong. Okay. That was the total amount of knowledge that we had. And I see this, and I'm in shock. And I turn to my mom and says, "It's gone. It's gone. She's going to die. How is she going to pee? It's this, Mom. There's not." My mom gets all embarrassed. She says, "I'll explain to you when we get home." I said, "Okay." Well, she didn't. The explanation, I would keep this whole thing very short because there's a lot of stories. She said, "Okay, listen, what you call your peepees, that's not the real name of it. It's called a penis." I said, "Uh-huh." "And what happened?" "Well, but what happened when it's gone?" She said, "Well, if you don't have it, it's called a vagina." I said, "Yeah, but how does it work? What does it do? I don't understand." She said, "That's enough for now. You'll understand when you get older." I see my friend Maddie. I go outside the house, and I said, "Hey, Maddie." She says, "You never guess what I saw today." And I explained to him. He said, "That's a lot of baloney. That's not possible." I says, "I'm telling you, my mother, this is what my mother." He said, "Well, listen, let me get my baseball glove. We'll have a game of catch, but I'm going to ask my mother if she knows what a vagina is. And then we go play." He comes out. I said, "What'd she say?" She said the same thing your mother said. "You'll know more when you get older." I said, and that was my introduction. That's when we knew girls were really different.
Oh, wow.
That's 1947, 48. Okay. So people don't really understand. Most people didn't have a car. Right. When we had a house, there was nobody had a garage with the car. I mean, it was a house. Okay. And if you had a car, well, nobody on our block had a car. The first car we had was my father got a car in 1950. It was a 1939 Buick. Big car. Paid $250 for it. And that's what we went on. Okay. Now you think, you would say, well, okay, fine. We had it for a couple of years, and then we got a Buick that was 3 years old. Okay. So that was a little more modern, but we only had one car. Most people didn't. Very few people had two cars. Very few people. Anyway, which that leads you to another story. Okay. This story, and I know somebody said, "Have you checked other stories that are like?" I said, no. I said, "These are the stories because it's my story. It was my life, Wow. He said, "Well, what happened with the story?" I said, "Well," it was Sunday. And we were at my grandmother's house, my father's mother. We never called her grandma. We called her Fat Mama because she was fat. So we always called her Fat Mama. The other one who lived with us, we called her Nonna because she was another type of one. She was different. She wasn't one of these loving Italian grandmas. She's just the opposite. She was like a garden. It was like a garden at prison camp. But Fat Mama was pretty easy. She was soft and billowy, and you could hug her and fall asleep right on her chest. It was great. Anyway, we were having dinner there that one Sunday, and my father sees it starting to snow. He goes, "Oh, come on, let's go. Now, the average ride from where we lived in Queens at that time, as we had moved, I was like, I guess I was just about 9 or 10 at the time. And it was like a 30-minute drive. Well, in New York, if it starts to snow, everything starts to stop and slow down. And, we get in, we're all piling into the car, no seatbelts or anything like that. That's much in the future. We get in the car, and my father says, "Oh," he says, "I hope it doesn't stop. I hope it stops. Nothing. 10 minutes on the highway, everything stops." We're sitting in the car for about 15 minutes, and my mother says to my father, he says, "Al, I have to pee." He says, "Well, I got nothing here." He says, "Well, I mean, I really have to." He's the only thing we got in here is this little ashtray. We got an ashtray. Look, I'll take my cigar butts out. My father used to smoke these Italian stogies. He said, "I'll dump them out in the highway." Okay. He says, "Here you go." She says, "It smells of your cigar." He says, "Well, what do you want me to do?" He says, "This is all we got." She goes, "Oh." So now I'm in a backseat, and I see my mother moving like I didn't think she could move like that. She's squirming this way and that way, and she's trying to remove a girdle, and then she's moving her panties and so forth. I'm in the backseat. I can't. My mother's got moves like I never do. Fantastic moves. So she tells me, she says, "Listen, when I say lower the window, you lower it, roll down the window. And when I say finish, you roll it up." I said, "Okay." Now she's trying to aim. I just remember her moving towards the end of this seat, in the front seat. Okay. And here she's, "God damn it, Al. This is not going well." And my father says, "Yeah. He said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" So he said, "Okay, Sonny, roll down the window." I rolled down the window. I did it 7 times. And my mom's really pissed, Anyway, we finally get home, and my mother can't wait to get out of the car. And as she's walking out of the car towards the door, my father yells, "Hey, make sure that thing's clean. That's where I keep my cigar butts." The stories go on and on and on. I sent a copy of the book to Ken Burns, the guy that does the documentaries. And I got a letter from his office, which really kind of surprised me, which wasn't an email, it was an actual letter. I said, "Geez, where's this from?" And they said that they thought that he couldn't do anything about it, because I was looking, maybe somebody be interested in a movie or something, And he said, "No," he said, "but I think it's got possibilities as a movie." Well, I was working on a sequel. I said, "Well, the hell, the sequel, I'll write a screenplay." I never wrote a screenplay. So I got a book on how to write a screenplay. I wrote a screenplay. That's a lot of fun, because you're God. You're all these different characters, and you're alone. There's nobody else around you. It's absolute quiet. And I find I'm talking in a girl's voice for this guy, and then I'm talking to this guy's voice and so forth. And I'm really enjoying myself just writing. Okay. So I write the screenplay. So that's, I believe it or not, we've had 2 people requesting to see screenplay so far. I'm working with these people in California, and this guy, young guy, 26 or so, really terrific. I love working with young people. I don't hang around with old people. The only thing they can talk about is their meds and the last time they're going to see a doctor. They don't live. I mean, because you get old, you don't stop living. You don't stop thinking. And so we got a couple of guys looking at it and so forth. So we'll see what happens. But I've got, more chapters in it. It's based on the book, but I got other stories in there besides that. I'll give you one of the stories happens to be, I know we're talking about the book, but I like this story so much, I repeat it all the time.
I'm ready to hear it.
Okay. We moved to Queens, and I'm out of Catholic school because we moved to Queens. And not only that, I had gotten fired as an altar boy because I drank too much wine and I fell asleep in the gospel on high mass, and I embarrassed the priest. But he said that. So now I'm in Queens. Now, so I go from Resurrection Church now to PS 138. Okay, I still know the number. I still remember PS 138. And we got this another couple that moved next door to us. So this guy see this kid's about my age. I said, "Hi, what's your name?" He says, "My name is Jerry Logan." I says, I says, "You study?" He says, "No, I got Tourette's." I said, "What the hell is that?" He says, Well, I get nervous, but when I know somebody, after a while, it's